Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Colledge and welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. What I'm going to do in this podcast today is to build on what I talked about last time, which was some fundamental principles to have in mind when you think about really building the innovation cycle into your organization so that innovations, useful, valuable innovations, will happen naturally as a result of the people, the cognitive mix, and the culture that you put in place. So I talked about the innovation cycle, which is getting from the big idea to evaluating the ideas to address that big idea to executing to completion. Talked about that. And I also talked about a couple of frameworks which I think are really helpful to structure thoughts. One was the simple explore exploit framework, and the second was Patrick Lencioni's 6 working geniuses model, which I linked to the innovation cycle. And it's the 6 working geniuses that I'm going to focus on more today. And what I want to do is to build your understanding of the different types of working geniuses and show you how they map along the innovation cycle to be really crystal clear about why it's so important to have all of those geniuses in your organization so that that innovation cycle can run naturally and really effectively. The phrase that I usually use to describe working geniuses is cognitive diversity. Sometimes I say neurostyles, but I think more often I say cognitive diversity. And that's differences in the ways that we all engage with information. How do we take it in? How do we process it? And how do we broadcast whatever it is that we've done with that information? And this is only to do with our innate brain structures. Our brains are hardwired in different ways, and we each have particular hardwired ways of engaging with information. This is not to do with acquired skills or knowledge. This is to do with how we inherently use the skills or knowledge that we acquire during our lives. And that depends on the way our brain is structured, and that's something that we can't change. So this is really about how our brains work well, and because everything comes with a cost, how they don't work well, right? And how we can put that to play for us in terms of the innovation cycle. And what I just said about cognitive diversity, brains working well in some ways and not well in the other ways, that's reflected in Patrick Lencioni's model, because he says each of us is a natural at 2 of the working geniuses. We're okay at another 2, and we'll struggle with the last 2. That's how it's represented in his model. But what I want to do now is to take some time to think about what makes a person either a good explorer or a good exploiter. And I'll use the mapping that I made of the 6 working geniuses to exploring or exploiting to do that. So let's first think, explorers are people who are comfortable taking risk and pushing the boundaries of what's accepted. Now, there are 2 working geniuses in exploring. So let's start with the working genius of wonder. Working geniuses of wonder are people who will naturally challenge what is accepted, what we take for granted. They will push at the status quo, and they'll constantly ask, what if, what if, what if? They're curious, and they don't feel constrained by whatever we think is the reality at the moment. They always want to push and look beyond our reality. For each of these working geniuses, I want to share some well-known examples to help to bring them to life in your mind. And a couple of well-known geniuses of wonder, excuse me, are Galileo and Einstein. So Galileo is someone who just didn't accept that the Earth was at the center of the universe and that it was this perfectly formed celestial sphere just because the church said so, and that was the accepted reality of the day. He thought that the universe was governed by physical rules, and he asked what if, and that was how he spent his life. Einstein also questioned what were fundamental accepted principles of the universe, and asked questions like, what if I could ride on a beam of light? What would I experience? What would I see? So they were great examples of the working genius of wonder. The second working genius, which falls into the explorer zone is invention, the working genius of invention. And this is not about asking what if, but this is about, once you have the question, really being able to relax the rules of what you think you know, relax the connections that you currently recognize between things, to be able to challenge norms, to be able to see things from a different perspective, to be able to create different kinds of connections between things, to be able to predict a different future. And it's the ability to create something entirely original. So again, let me share a couple of famous examples with you. So when I think of invention, the person who immediately comes to my mind, because I'm fascinated by him, is Charles Darwin. He was able to relax the conventional belief at the time that all species were created by the divine and that they were fixed and immutable. He was able to detach himself from that pretty much accepted truth, and instead he connected the observations that he was making in nature. He connected those in a new way, a completely new way. It was based logically on the evidence that he saw, but he connected everything together in a new way. And I think it's incredible how he was able to detach his mental process from all of the pressures that especially he felt in his life as a son of a clergyman. And he himself was strongly religious. He was able to step aside from that and come up with this original idea. Really incredible. Da Vinci is another really good example. So he drew from lots and lots of different disciplines, which helped his natural propensity to connect things in different ways. He stimulated those different kinds of connections, and he came up with all kinds of novel ideas. So I'm just going to pause there before we move to the exploiters and the 4 related working geniuses of exploitation, and suggest to you that this is a good time to reflect on how important it is to create the right conditions for our explorers to do their best work in your organization. So what you don't want for an explorer is that they come up with an idea and someone immediately says, oh, but have you thought about this problem? Or, oh, have you thought about that problem? Are we sure that we have enough money or time or resource or whatever to be able to do this? You don't want that. You want explorers to be able to freely explore the ideas that they have in response to the problem that they're identifying or have been given. The evaluation and all of the practical stuff comes later, but you need to make sure that your workplace isn't stifling the creativity and the originality of your explorers. I found an interesting quote from Einstein. Apparently he said, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. And I think from his perspective, as an explorer, that was clearly the case. But from your perspective, as the leader of an organization, this is not the case. Not if you want a functioning innovation cycle to run naturally in your organization and produce all of this fantastic new value all the time. You need more than imagination so that you can evaluate and execute to completion. So you need the ability to exploit as well as the ability to explore. They complement each other. So let's move on to exploiting now. So remember that the exploiting phase of the innovation cycle is where the ideas that you generated or that were generated during the exploration phase are evaluated, a plan is created, and executed to completion. It's where the value actually happens. You actually get something out of those ideas. Let's start with the working genius of discernment. And discernment is all about being able to look at this pile of ideas that you've got from the exploration phase and evaluate them. Be critical, be rational. Yes, use an evidence base, but also use experience and a bit of instinct. You need to know what the criteria are by which you need to evaluate this set of ideas so that you can make a call on which is the right one or maybe 2 to go ahead with, so that you try to avoid wasting effort and get the most from your resources. And this is a particular mental setting that some of us have. And those people are able to make a very rational call about what to do and what not to do. Example, think about someone like Oprah Winfrey. She always seems to land on her feet. Good discerners always seem to land on their feet. She's really good at discerning what her audience wants and giving it to them. She's very intuitive when it comes to people. She knows what her audience needs and she knows what they will value and she gives it to them. Very strong working genius of discernment. Let's move on to galvanizing. Galvanizing is all about motivating people to actually go and do something. You need to create a shared goal and then communicate with a clear vision and with passion, and by connecting emotionally to a person, entice people to actually start to do something to move towards that goal. It's not easy. That goal is something new, it's something different, and people have inherent resistance to doing new and different things. But people who are good at galvanizing are inspirational and they can overcome that innate resistance. So for examples of people who are great at galvanizing, think of people who started movements. I'm going to share a couple of examples here with you. One is Greta Thunberg. She has been very effective at mobilizing people to act, to take action on climate change. She's inspired millions to actually do something. And it's not only individuals, but it's also governments and organizations. She's got very consistent messaging. She's got a clear vision. She talked about it quite straightforwardly, clearly passionate, and she made people want to do something. Another example is Nelson Mandela, who had an incredible ability to motivate people to look past the huge divides in South Africa. All right, so we've selected an idea and we have a team of people who want to get moving. So the last two working geniuses are the ones who will enable them to move and actually make sure that that value comes out. That value comes out at the end of the whole process. Enablement, the working genius of enablement, is about action. Enabling a team to act. Enabling a team by making sure that it has what it needs when it needs it. So enablers are people who are really team oriented. They're very collaborative, they're very adaptable, and they support others by making sure that they have the resources or the help or the training, the confidence that they need to be able to keep moving through a plan. To execute these evaluated ideas. So for examples of great enablers, think about someone who was able to create consensus and unity by causing people to believe in a common goal and getting them to actually do things practically. So the example that I have here that I want to share with you is Florence Nightingale. So she was able to use even a very high pressure situation, World War I, to set up frameworks to improve healthcare. And she set up those frameworks in such a way that other people were able to copy her. And the result was that she revolutionized nursing in that very difficult high pressure time when I'm pretty sure nobody was really thinking about changing nursing. Their attention was elsewhere. And the last working genius is tenacity. And this is all about seeing projects through to completion. Other words for it that you might use will be determined, disciplined, resilient, because these people will just keep going until they reach their goal. Maybe you say they've got strong characters, they're gritty, they have an iron will. Those people are working geniuses of tenacity. They're really focused on outcomes. They love achieving their goals and they have an absolute laser focus on delivering results. So the examples that I have here for you are Serena Williams, obviously the most successful female tennis player ever, and she was just determined to push through many challenges that she found in getting to this position in tennis, and achieving her goal. to be the greatest female tennis star. That just epitomizes tenacity. And the second example that I have is J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series. So she was rejected repeatedly by publishers, but she kept going to get Harry Potter published. And it was also quite a struggle for her to complete the Harry Potter books anyway, because her life was full with other things. So also incredibly tenacious person. All right, so that's the end of the 6 working geniuses and their characteristics and examples. And now that we've explored, I should say, now that we've taken a look at the characteristics of explorers and exploiters, I hope you can see how critical it is to have people who are naturals in each of these styles in your organization. So the organization will naturally enjoy the outcomes of a really great innovation cycle if you enable it with your culture. Now, if you have any gaps in these working geniuses, you can see now, if you weren't sure before, I think, that you're going to struggle, right? And if you want to make the most of your talent, you really need to make sure that you not only have the balance between all these different styles, but that you enable it with your culture. You can quite easily have people with a mix of different styles who don't want to work together. They all do things in a different way. They may not necessarily value the different perspectives that each other brings to a particular project. So you need to train people and set the expectations that they have to work together, and that's all to do with your culture. So it's a cognitive mix and culture. Now, I want to be clear that what I'm talking about is innate style, right? It's something that can't be changed. You're just born with it. It's innate. That's what it means. I'm not talking about learned skills or experience. So let me just dig into the learned skills and experience a little bit more. I'm going to take the skill of planning as an example. Now, it's clearly critical to get your planning right to be able to convert an idea into some value. But I haven't really talked about planning at all while I was talking about the 6 working geniuses. And that's because it doesn't belong to any one stage. It's not a cognitive style, it's a skill. It's something that you can learn, it's something you can get better at. So it fits with multiple working geniuses. So obviously it fits with enablement, right, which is about getting the right resources to the right people at the right time. There's a huge amount of planning in there, but there are a couple of other places where it fits as well. It fits with discernment, which is all about evaluating. So how do you evaluate? There's a lot of planning in there as well. Do these ideas fit with strategic goals? There's a bit of planning in there, but probably more closely related is the kind of thinking about, does this fit within the resources that we have? Does this fit within the time available that we have? You need to have some idea of planning and how long it's going to take something to come to fruition, what kind of resources, what kind of skills, what kind of behaviors you're going to need to get something to fruition, to know whether you have that in-house, and to be able to bring that into your whole evaluation process. There's also an element of planning in tenacity, contingency planning. I'm pretty sure that J.K. Rowling managed to finish writing the Harry Potter series by having a contingency plan and sticking to it very well when she was a single mum looking after her kids on her own and working. She didn't just sit down and write Harry Potter in all her free time. She had a plan. So there's certainly some element of planning in tenacity as well. So the reason I'm going through this is to emphasize that the same skill, in this case planning, is used in different ways by people who have different natural brain styles, different natural ways of working, right? The same skill is used in different ways. I also said that when I said this is about innate style, not skills, that it also wasn't about knowledge or experience. Knowledge or experience is also used in different ways depending on your brain style. If you learn about AI, for example, many people are learning about AI at the moment, then depending on your natural brain style, you will use that learning in a different way. And that just reflects our different styles, that reflects our cognitive diversity. So this is really an important point, right? What I want to emphasize is that this is about our style of working, our innate style of working, and that is where we get our energy from and what we enjoy doing. It's something we can't change. People can learn to work outside their styles, but they won't probably be as good at it as they will if they're working in their natural style, and they will be unhappy, and eventually they will burn out. If they have to do that for a long time, if they're forced to work outside their natural styles for a long time, they will disengage and eventually burn out. That's why it's not effective to fix gaps in people's cognitive styles. Instead, it's best to work on amplifying their strengths and making sure that in situations where for most of the time those strengths can be used and valued, then people will be engaged, happy, then they will bring their best performance to your teams and to your organization. So for most of the time, people need to be matched to their preferred styles. Of course, it's never possible 100% of the time. A bit of mismatch is okay, but for most of the time, they should be doing what they naturally want to do. So that's why it's so important when you think about putting a natural innovation cycle in place that you have cognitive diversity in your organization. You need the mix of cognitive styles, because you don't want people to be working outside of their preferred style for a long time. This is proved in the research literature. I'm not going to go into it now, but it's proved in the research literature. The only kind of diversity that makes any difference in the ability to solve problems is cognitive diversity. It's not the first thing we think of because we can't see it, but that's the only thing that matters. It's not gender, it's not age, it's not educational background, it's not ethnicity, it's cognitive diversity. That's the only thing. It is also proved, though, that you need to activate your cognitive diversity with your culture, which is why I talk about designing and creating a cognitively inclusive culture. And if you don't have that culture, then you end up in the Polaroid problem that I talked about in episode 12, and you can have a listen to that if you're interested in learning more. So I'm going to leave the new content of this podcast here, but I thought I would let you know about the content that I'm going to share with you for the next few podcasts, which is going to build on what I've talked about today. So there's some really interesting scientific research that exists because particular cognitive styles can be defined and measured. So for example, people who have ADHD have particular cognitive traits which can be described and measured in other people. So knowing that lets you check the association between the extent of somebody's ADHD-like traits and their ability to do particular things, to work in a particular way. And it's the same with other neurodivergences, dyslexia, autism, whatever. But you can see that some of the skills that you really want, some of the working geniuses that you really want for a thriving innovation cycle are really highly enriched in populations associated with a particular neurodivergence. So this tells you, gives you some really important clues about what you should be thinking about when you're going to put this enabling culture in place, this cognitively inclusive culture in place, to make sure that all of your cognitive mix can do wonderful, innovative things. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk more about some of that fascinating research. And next week, what I want to do is share with you a case study, a very personal case study that was published by the lead of a research lab who works with an autistic team member. And he described really quite interestingly and beautifully some of the benefits to innovation that he experienced from that particular situation. In the meantime, have a look around in your organization and see how many of these different types of working geniuses you can identify. How many can you spot? And can you perhaps see a weakness in your cognitive diversity, which is something that we could try to fill to improve your natural innovation cycleness? Well, thanks for listening. See you next time.